Honorable Bhadain.
Thank you. Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir. For 1 minute, I believed that the theatre plaza had already been renovated, and we have a few actors playing already. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the budget presented by the Honourable Minister of Finance last year did create a field budget, included the 12.7 billion rupees that we obtained from India as a grant. Of course, it allowed to balance the books and also to provide measures to eradicate absolute poverty, predicted a GDP growth rate of 4.1%. But let me start, Mr. Deputy Speaker, by saying that when I went to India and when I negotiated the grant of 12.7 billion rupees, India, Mr. Arun Jaitley, there were a few arguments which we had put forward. The first of those arguments, Mr. Deputy Speaker, was that the line of credit that had been granted to Mauritius by His Excellency, the Prime Minister of India, Mr. Narendra Modi, when he came here in this House, actually in March 2015, that line of credit of $500 million could not be used. C'était inutilisable. Why? Because it was going to push up our public debt to such an extent that we would not be in a position to deal with the aftermath of it, especially in the light of the limitations that the IMF had imposed on Mauritius. And those limitations, in those days, the IMF insisted that Mauritius passes an act of Parliament, the Public Debt Management Act, to take a commitment that we were going to reduce our public debt to 50% of GDP. And the debt and the deadline for that is in 2018. So that was the first argument that we used to explain that, look, we need assistance to do these projects, and we need grant money, not debt, not line of credit. The second issue, Mr. Deputy Speaker, was currency risk. And we explained to the Minister of Finance of India that if we were to take $500 million as line of credit, debt, then of course we would have to repay those dollars. And when you look at what was happening to the dollar-rupee rate, if only we take from 2011, when the current Minister of Finance was Minister of Finance, the dollar was around 29 rupees. And now, 5-6 years later, we're talking about 35 rupees plus. So we're talking about 6 rupees on $1. Imagine what happens when you take 500 million US dollars as debt and you have to repay it in dollars, and the risk that our country would have to face in terms of the depreciating currency. So these were the arguments that we put forward, and we explained that we needed funds to do development projects in our country, but these funds, we must be able to use it, and we needed it as equity, not as debt. Now, I will come back to the 12.7 billion rupee grant later, but suffice to say at this stage that the grant that was negotiated at that time in India was for $9.2 billion, which they agreed. And when I came back to Mauritius, I duly informed the then Prime Minister that 9.2 billion is what we have obtained, which was 253 million US dollars for specific projects. But then, of course, we had to go through a full process of sending those project documents to the authorities in India so that they could sit down, look at the feasibility, the viability of all these projects before deciding to give, of course, their taxpayers' money, because that's what it was, money from taxpayers of India. Now, at that time, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the then Prime Minister told me, he said, what about this metro project? What about this metro project? There was a line of credit of $100 million which had been given by the government of India to the previous government. Couldn't we talk to them so that we could convert that into a grant, into a donation? And I told him, well, this was not discussed, but I'll certainly take up the matter. And I can say that during the negotiations, of course, continued when I came back from India, and we sent all the documents across, and of course, we interacted with the Indian High Commission also. And then the Prime Minister of India sent his special envoy to Mauritius, Mr. Jayashankar, who was also a Foreign Secretary.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, the debate is on the appropriation bill. And I'm referring to Standing Order 73, subsection 2, where it says that after the motion for the second reading of the bill has been made and seconded, the debate thereon shall be adjourned until the next sitting, and when resumed shall be confined to the general principles of government policy and administration as indicated by the bill and the estimates. What the Honourable Member is doing is giving details about things that he did when he was Minister, and he is departing from the provisions of the Standing Order. That is out of order, and I urge you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to give a ruling that he has to confine himself to the general principles of government policy and administration and nothing else.
Honourable Member, Honourable Gayan, on which standing order are you relying?
Standing Order 73-2.
Honourable Members, I shall take some time and give a ruling on the issue. The House is suspended for... The House is suspended for half an hour.